Hello, UK Crime Book Club. Happy belated Easter to anybody that we've missed. I hope you've all had a lovely Easter weekend if you celebrate, or at least filled your face with chocolate if you're so inclined. And now we're back for Tuesday night with the lovely, lovely, lovely Andrew Lowe, and I'm thrilled to bits to have you here, Andrew.
Hi Sam, it's a pleasure. I've got some artisanal chocolate brownies left over from Easter. They were like £7 for 4.
£7 for 4. They must be good.
They're from like the garden centre. One of those garden centres that are just ridiculous. Everything's like about twice as much. But yeah.
But you know, if they're made by, if they're not mass produced and they're made by handmade with love by somebody, I think it's fair to pay a bit more.
That's what they want you to think. I think it's like a sweatshop somewhere. That's them out.
Moving swiftly on before we get stuck on this. Tell us a little bit about the Jake Sawyer series so far.
Well, we're up to
and tell us about Tender is the North, which is coming up on 26th of April, I believe.
26th of April, yeah. We're up to 10 books, including the prequel now. So, I mean, it's kind of been, it's one of these series that I wrote it sequentially, so it's kind of hard to just dip into book 7 because you like to look at the cover or something. You sort of have to get on board at the start. It's towards you as the more you go on, the more you sort of get a grip of all the main characters. But it's a crime series, dark crime. It's set in the north of set in Derbyshire and north of England, Manchester, Sheffield. One book. He goes down to London for one book for a particularly nasty case, and so and it's a main character who is begins the series where he's a detective and he's spent some time in the Met and he's drawn back into his hometown in Derbyshire because there's a case. They've set up a new team there, but also he has an ulterior motive because when he was 6, he saw his mother murdered savagely in front of him and survived it. He was attacked himself, and he never believed the guy who was convicted for the murder was who actually did it. So it's been a bit of a sort of life obsession with him, and he grew up. He became a detective, and now he has the kind of smarts and the wherewithal to actually pursue that as well as a kind of backstory to the series, and that does deepen even though it resolves sort of midway through. Then there's also this, it gets kind of more and more complicated how it will happen. So each book has a different case. It has an individual case for him to deal with, and you just meet as the series goes on. You meet the side characters, the other detectives. You meet, and towards the middle of the series, I introduce an element of sort of Manchester kind of gangland kicks in, where he unfortunately sort of rubs up against the wrong sort of people in that sort of element, and then that just complicates his life even more. So so we're on. I've just finished book 9, which is called Tender is the North, and it's going to be out on 26th of April. And I thought it was going to be the last book, but I'm going to do some more. I can't really let it go. It's too good. The character's too good for me. I just enjoy writing too much. So I'm going to keep going with it. And obviously, the more I write, the more just into the whole characters I get. And but a lot of the threads are resolved at the end of this book, and so I'm looking forward to kind of having this sort of semi-clean break with him on the next book, where I've got ideas where I want to take him and free him up a little bit more. So that's where we are with it.
So you just mentioned about, we won't go into it too much, but Jake witnessing this horrific murder of his mother. I mean, if you just picked up any one of the books and read from the prologue, I would imagine you'd know straight away these are not kind of cozy crimes. They are very, very dark. You really go there. You don't hold back, and you really explore not just the violence of the scenes, but all of the underlying emotion as well of the scenes. There is so much depth to what you write.
Thank you. Well, what's important to me when I research it is I research trauma a lot. I research the psychology of trauma. A lot of crime writers say this, but yeah, psychology is my degree, and I really wanted to understand. In a way, they've sort of found a moment, I think, because male mental health and mental health in particular is obviously pretty big at the moment. It wasn't when I started writing these books a few years ago. So I think they've kind of come of age a little bit in that sense, in that topic. And so Sawyer is a character who's suffers from PTSD in the classical sense, but there's also a lot going on with him in terms of his defenses, his response to danger. The series begins where his sort of mental block is that he doesn't feel the kind of primal fear response, which is really a trauma. It's a kind of well-known trauma where the worst thing that's happened to you has happened, so you don't fear anything else. So, which is a good thing and a bad thing, mostly bad, because fear is obviously healthy. So yeah, he is, he's complex, and for a reason. And yeah, as you say, I really tried to get into the visceral emotion scenes rather than just blood flying everywhere and people's intestines falling out and things. So yeah, and I wanted to get under the skin of the reader really, because a review that I really liked, one of my early reviews said something like prose that gets under the flesh and into your bones or something. So I wanted to get that feeling of these are dark books, but they're not gratuitous. So I didn't want to write things that were just, as I say, just splatter.
Yeah, none of it's just for the sake of it, is there?
Yeah,
There's a real reason, whether we agree with the reason or not, and you're very good at putting all of that in. There are people who are going to hate the people you're going to love to hate, the people you resonate with. You've got all of that, and none of it is just glorified.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's made me care. It's the old thing. I really try to get the characters as sort of empathic as possible, so you've got a sense of. It's the thing that there are no real good guys and bad guys in life, really. I think it's just about, certainly in fiction, as long as you buy why they're doing what they're doing, then you can root for them in a weird sort of way. What they're doing is technically bad, but much more interesting. I really like things like Vince Gilligan's work with Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. That's the most contemporary version of like an anti-hero, or somebody who is, doing bad things traditionally, but tells himself that they're doing it for the right reasons. Yeah, a lot of bad things are done because of people think they're doing it for good reasons, don't they? So it's complicated. I'm really interested in where that line is. That sort of what people are capable of, and where they get to a point where they just think they know this is bad what they're doing, but they've told themselves a story as to why it's justified, and that's really interesting if you can get into that. But I mean, the other thing that I'm completely obsessed by is revenge. Revenge is almost the theme of
something we have in common. This obsession, yeah.
So really, just the bottomlessness of revenge, and how I'm just really always interested in that because particularly men. When I was researching the books, I spoke to this guy who works in a psychiatric hospital, and he was saying the big thing that he sees with men and male violence is humiliation. There's always an element of humiliation at the heart of male violence. Whether it's you think someone spilled your pint in the pub and you feel kind of slighted by that, if someone spilled in front of your mates, it's embarrassing for you. You need to right that wrong, rebalance the world as you see it. Or, on a bigger scale, something where someone has done something that you feel they got away with, and you can't let them get away with that. That impulse, I think, is very male. It's fascinating to me as the theme, and I was on a flight back from Naples a few years ago, and in front of me there was a couple, and there was a guy in this couple, and someone in front of them, they were making a bit of noise, and a man in front, Italian guy, stood up and shouted at them, swore at them to shut up, really aggressively from nowhere, and they just went, just okay, right, and the flight 2-3 hours, we got off the plane in Heathrow, got back to all the little coach things, and this guy exploded at this guy who'd shouted at him. He suddenly waited for like 3 or 4 hours, knowing he can't kick off on the plane.
Yeah.
So he just waited, he held it, which I thought was fascinating. He just completely went crazy, this guy, and he actually dragged off. And I thought, yeah, he sort of served his revenge cold there. He's waited, and and it was just, it really had an effect on me. I thought, yeah, that's something really powerful about that. That you can't just go, let's move on, we'll let that go. That was weird. You just had to right that wrong. The world was off balance. So yeah, that's a bit of an obsession with the books generally. I think. You often see some of the cases in the books. There's some sort of revenge element in there somewhere. There's some kind of, someone who didn't have the power to fight back at the time, but has now accumulated enough, physicality or intelligence or age or experience that they can finally, right that wrong. Yeah.
I watched an interview that you did a while ago, which is when I realised that we had this kind of thing for revenge and the motives behind it and how people act it out and all of that. But it was you had to talk about favourite books of yours, and the first one that you went for was Carrie. And the line was, "If you're seeking revenge, dig 2 graves." And it stuck with me, and I wrote it down at the time that I watched the interview, which is also when I bought Savages, which we'll talk about next. But Carrie, what was your choice? Why was Carrie one of your choices?
Stephen King probably made me want to write, I think, initially, because I used to get his books out of the library. When I first started to get books out of the library, I would get those out of the children's library. And then I'd go, I've had enough of these children's books. And I started to get books out of the grown-ups library. As all kids do, you want to go.
Yeah.
And then I started reading James Herbert books and all kinds of horror. But Stephen King worked for me because Carrie's quite a short book, actually, when you look at it. So it was a good graduation for me to sort of go from reading kids' novels and kids' books into the adult world. It was quite short, but I just love it's in a sort of diary form, isn't it? When you read the book, it's a diary form.
I haven't actually read it. I've got it, but I'm such a big wuss that The Shining was quite a difficult read for me. Right. I absolutely loved it, but I wouldn't read it at lunchtime.
Yeah,
because I couldn't sleep.
Yeah, and so Carrie's great because it kind of made me think of, there's the main character in that. Carrie is essentially revenge is at the heart of Carrie, isn't it? The whole idea of revenge. But I found, it's old enough now we can talk about what happens, can't we? Carrie is not.
I would imagine that anyone who just thinks in your ears for 2 minutes if you're planning on reading it soon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what really struck me about Carrie is that she's abused, she's bullied, she's traumatized, she's humiliated, all of those things, and then there's this. I studied classics at A level, and the idea of catharsis really is like it's a huge catharsis in Carrie, where you feel that release of emotion, of energy in that revenge, that moment of terrible revenge, and it just kind of blew my hair back when I had that, and it's just incredible. And then the film, Brian De Palma's film. I used to be a film journalist, and it's always been one of my favourite sequences in films. You watch films and you get that tingly glow, that tingly feeling, where you just go, "Whoa, this is doing something to me physically. It's just really hitting me on a visceral level." I really felt that, where they do that amazing split screen effect, where she gets the pig's blood dumped over her head, and then you see her just totally, everyone's laughing at her, and you see her expressions change, and then she's looking around towards different kind of people she's going to take revenge on. And then you see that split screen effect, which is just really, really powerful. So yeah, I kind of, it really had a big effect on me, that book, and I wanted to, that sort of got inside me as a writer, I think. I just wanted to sort of see if I could emulate that kind of feeling.
I do know the scene that you're talking about as well. I think it's one of those things that, even if you've not read the book, not seen the film, it's just one of those scenes that most people seem to know something about. Yeah,
just wreaking a sort of terrible revenge. Just something really, if you can get that right, it's without it being too sort of kitschy or over the top. And again, make me care. You're absolutely rooting for that character in that moment. You despise those people who've done that to her, but also she's doing something bad again. She's killing people. She's hurting people, and but you're still going with it. So
still rooting for her.
Yeah, so I just love that sort of feeling of it just messing with your head a little bit and just pushing you one way and the other way, and you don't know. This isn't technically this isn't a good thing, but the righteousness of it is so powerful. And yeah, so Stephen King, and obviously a lot of his books really influenced me, and just in the readability and just and can I mix a bit of literary sort of style here and there with that kind of readability of Stephen King, that you the propulsiveness of it, the stickiness, can't put it down, let's keep going. So what was the question again? Why did I love Stephen King? Anyway, so yeah, I read a lot of those books, a lot of horror, and I was really into the revenges tragedies as well, where they seem to be, Shakespeare. I read a lot of Shakespeare, but there's also a sort of a darker version where I think it's Jacobean era. They had lots of plays with lots of revenge and bloody revenge in it. And I always kind of weirdly enjoyed those a bit more than Shakespeare, because they just sort of seemed to be a B-movie Shakespeare. And but yeah, they were pretty good as well.
We've got a lot of hellos, so thank you to everyone who's joined us and said hello so far. Pat Barnes says, good evening, I'm looking forward to the new book coming out.
Yeah. Well, the new book is it's called Tender as the North, and it's based on, that's from a Tennyson poem, the title, and it's sort of referring to how, the North is a kind of righteous, I think the quote is dark and true and tender as the North. And so it's a sort of feeling of the character, it evokes the character, Jake Sawyer himself, and also there's a kind of theme in the book as well. But it's about, shall I tell you a bit about the book? About the new one?
Please. No spoilers.
Yeah, my editor sends me emojis when she finishes books and when we start working on them. And happily, she sent me loads of like shock emojis and lots of crying emojis, which is always a good thing. But so and she said this is definitely your nastiest case ever so far. So there's a character who is arrested for abusing bodies in a mortuary in a hospital.
Yikes.
So there's a kind of necrophile aspect to this book. So I'm trying to think of the trigger warnings that'll be on this book. If you kind of saw the trigger warnings in the corner of the screen, it'll be contained scenes of. And so,
I think where you've started from kind of shows us where we're going. I think you're good.
Yeah, so basically he's arrested, but it's a tricky one because I don't really want to spoil the whole journey of the books, the sort of backstory. So I want to be a bit vague about that. But the main case itself is the guy who's arrested for abusing these bodies, and it's really, and the press start to crassly give him a nickname, the Vulture, which is because he feasts when they're sort of just after the death, but then he's kind of, so there's a bit of a kind of an idea of there's a sort of tabloidization of this character, and as the book goes on, you realise that there's a young woman who's found murdered with also sort of post-mortem sexual abuse, and Sawyer and a few of the others start to realise that the guy they've actually got in custody isn't the real Vulture. There's somebody else doing this. So it gets more and more complicated, and I can't really say anything else about it really, because it's just sort of it's a pretty nasty one. It is quite a nasty one, and I think I wrote a lot of it when I was in Las Vegas, because I went to Las Vegas to a writers' conference. I wrote a lot of it on the plane, a lot of it sitting around airports, and I was in a pretty dark mood at the time. I hate Las Vegas, and it was just a writers' conference. So I just sort of it was great for networking and the learning and stuff and the people, but the place is just, hell on earth, isn't it? So it all came out there, and it is quite a dark book. And the iBooks are pretty dark anyway, but this one is particularly, quite nasty. And so yeah, as it resolves, I think a story becomes drawn more and more into it, because for reasons I don't really want to talk about, he's not particularly involved at the beginning. And so I wanted to give some space to some of the side characters, because I get a lot of readers saying they love his relationship with Shepard, who's this character who suffers from anxiety, and they sort of help each other out a little bit. He's risen to become a BI. And also Dale Strickland, his character, is this kind of gang. It starts the series as a sort of a gangland, Manchester gang, a criminal, quite an unpleasant character, but then gets political ambitions. And by the time we get to Tender of the North, he's the mayor of Manchester. So I had to kind of take that journey very carefully, so it was relatively plausible. But so yeah, you've got lots of elements clashing, and I wanted to try and get it to the end where you could sort of say, if this is the last storybook, then it would kind of work. We could sort of leave it there. But halfway through writing it, I was thinking, there's more I've got to say about this character. So yeah, I'm going to do some more.
I do think we need to talk about Savages.
Yeah.
So, wrong side. I forget that the camera has me the wrong way around. Just have the book the right way around. So, when you were in the interview with Tim Lewis, you talked a little bit about Savages. Now, don't give us any spoilers, because I actually can't remember now what you said. But you did warn that it was a spoiler, and I bought it based on the spoiler, which is quite a coup, because I can't stand spoilers, and it sounded so good, even knowing what happened. I knew my memory was rubbish, and I wouldn't remember by the time I read it. Yeah. So that's what I'll be reading next, because obviously I wanted to show this one, Fear of God, first.
Yeah, Fear of God, that's 8, that's book 8. So you're getting back.
I know.
Yeah.
You read for interviews and things go out of order, and you just eventually get used to it.
Yeah, Savage's book that I wrote a few years ago, 5 friends, one of them turns 40. One of the other buys him a gift of a desert island survival experience. So they
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? They go to there's a lot of books set in resorts and on islands and things ever since I wrote Savages, I noticed, but it's the original and best. But this was so yeah, they go to this island and they get a sat phone, they get food, they get everything supplied, they get like gas powered fridges. It's not Bear Grylls, it's not survival, but it's just they're left on this really beautiful kind of island with a mangrove and a swamp and so really things start to go wrong, things start to disappear, and they're thinking, who's doing this? You're thinking of one of the other 5 of them, someone messing around, someone playing practical jokes, so yeah, it's quite. And then it deepens and deepens, and you realise, something quite big is actually going on. But yeah, so it's really about. I mean, there's a revenge element in this as well. I just can't get away from it. But yeah, so it's more of it actually got quite close to a potential sort of TV, a potential film being made. But as with lots of things, it just kind of at the time didn't quite pan out for those reasons.
Might be worth reaching out to whoever it was, because they are big again, so you never know.
But I think it'd be really good as a kind of like a mini series or something, as a sort of 3-parter.
Certainly sounds like it would.
Yeah, because the book is in 3 parts, and it's a tiny bit experimental. I don't mean in a sort of weird, there's no letter E in it or something. I mean, there's sort of, I think the first part is in general 3rd person, and the second part, you're in the main character Joel. You're in his sort of 1st person as he arrives on the island, and you get everything from his perspective. And then the 3rd part is in a sort of overall 3rd person again. So I was just sort of playing with the idea of perspective and how you can do a little bit more in 1st person. You can be a bit more in the character's head, rather and constantly telling people what they're thinking, which is a bit too telly. But you can sort of do that a bit more. So yeah, it's quite a propulsive book. It sort of starts. We get them onto the island, and then I just hurry up with getting on with things going wrong, because I just obviously knew where I wanted to go to, and yeah, I'm really pleased that it's one of those books that seems to be quite evergreen, even though I wrote it a few years ago. I get a lot of people writing to me saying, that ending, oh, it's a double twist. Oh my god, all this kind of thing. So hopefully I can revive it as the Jake Sawyer books starting to kind of become a bit more well known. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. One of the things I wanted to ask you was about subjects you've gone down a rabbit hole with. There's a line in the book, there's a bit in the book in Fear of God about burning traitors and heretics alive, prolonging the agony by wetting the wood. Now, that is a new detail for me, and I found it fascinating and absolutely awful, obviously, but really interesting. So what kind of things have you really explored subject-wise?
Well, Fear of God
even if you've not really used it.
Yeah. Fear of God has an element of, I went through a period of being a bit obsessed with the IRA, and obsessed with that kind of that period, sort of late early 80s, and that kind of armed struggle that erupted in Northern Ireland around that time. And again, my old friend Revenge, the idea that so again, I'm trying not to say too much about Fear of God, but there's an element in there of the Nutting Squad, which was the IRA's sort of group that rooted out traitors, rooted out people within the IRA who were performing for the and that gave me an idea that turned into Fear of God, really. So the sort of prologue of Fear of God is a kind of a traitor being interrogated and potentially tortured by a member of the Nutting Squad, and then cut to Sawyer, and then we sort of find our way back to how that all involves in the book itself. But so that was the kind of that's the theme behind that book. That but how it all plays into Derbyshire, how it all plays into that area. But what was the quote again? Traitors.
Prolonging the agony by wetting the wood, burning traitors and heretics alive.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's back to my idea of thinking the bad guy is a good guy in his own mind. And I remember reading something about people trying to understand terrorism and terrorists doing awful things, and you just have to slip into that mindset of realizing that those people in their mind, they are, they're freedom fighters. They're doing righteous things, and I think there's definitely something in that, particularly when you throw religion in there, because there's a quote in Fear of God where one of the characters is saying, once you have a fear of God, you have carte blanche, to do anything. Once you get a sense that there's a religious righteousness and a right to what you're doing, that's a terrifying idea in a sense that you just have that ultimate sort of justification for everything you're doing. And there's a sort of a madness in that, isn't there? There's a sort of there's a terrible continuum to that, and then where does that end? And you can pick a place in the world probably at the moment. You can see an example of that thing. Yeah. So I have tried to get lots of different. It's not just someone gets murdered and it's a serial killer, and we've got to find out who he is, and that sort of classic crime thing. I really want to try to get ideas in there about psychology and some sort of external ideas of religion is a big part of Fear of God, and as I say, Tender of the North. There's lots of themes in Tender of the North about that idea of where not sort of necrophilia as a itself, but paraphilia, the idea of sexual kind of aberration. And that's the word I'm trying to reach for. Like an aberration to everybody else, to external people looking in. But the person who has that, who's locked into that, in that grip, they need to get what they need. They have to do this awful thing that everyone, as far as we all see, the people who don't have that paraphilia. So that tension is really interesting to me, where, because tabloids can just say evil monster, does this, evil. It's just a bit too easy for me. I want to see the sort of, I want to see the colours running rather than just the sort of black and white version of that. So that's what I'm always trying to get at in the books.
Guy Hale, hi Guy, has said Adrian McKinsey's great on the Troubles in the 80s and 90s, and me and Guy have actually talked about this, not on camera, but we have discussed this. So did you find other authors that you kind of was there more fiction or was there non-fiction that you looked at, or a bit of both?
For the Troubles, it was really about that idea that just the intensity of that revenge, that violence, the intensity of that, the way that it was just a black hole that consumed families, and it was just this struggle that became so toxic individually and also to families and communities, and a political struggle at the heart of it, but the way that it just expanded and toxified this entire, all kinds of elements of that society. And and it's not really, I'm trying to stay away from it being a political sort of a political theme, but I found it was just a really good springboard to look at that idea of how one person can perhaps become how someone can become toxified. Because in Fear of God, there's a story where there's a father who's a headmaster who is killed by a group of teenagers. The two daughters who are teenagers at the time witness that happening, and we see how they become more and more involved in the story as the book goes on, and how that relates to the trouble. So it's not so much about the place or the setting, of that. It was more about the idea of how deeply that can consume. As I was saying earlier, how it can be so like a driving force, like a sort of germ inside people that starts to, or parasite perhaps, that starts to take over. I think in Skeleton Lake, someone mentions revenge as being like a parasite, that it just sort of takes over somebody, and they have to do its bidding to a degree, which I find terrifying and fascinating at the same time.
We were talking a little bit about the series, and I wondered what you'd learned about longevity in a series, because obviously, 9 books so far, more to come. What has been kind of a key factor for you moving forward?
Yeah, longevity was because I started writing it sequentially, as I said before, that I thought, I get a lot of authors saying, "Oh, you made a mistake there," because people won't go through the whole series. But so far, so good. They're really working through them. They're reading through.
That's the thing, people do. Everyone's got different ideas of what they enjoy.
Yeah, so I think I was a little bit ambitious, maybe thinking, let's do this sequentially. And people going, "Oh, they're not romance readers, though. They won't tolerate that. Romance readers burn through things, but crime readers, well, they do. I can show you the evidence. People do. Yeah. So really, I wanted the longevity of it. I worked really hard on making each book kind of the same but different in terms of the format. There's a sort of prologue, there's a cold open, then we discover what that's all about later on. 2 parts, and there's a bit of an epilogue where the backstory connects to the next book in some way. Not a cliffhanger, but it's something that, the book is resolved, but it's something that pulls you into the next book. So that seems to have worked quite well. So yeah, in terms of the longevity, I never thought I was going to write 10 books in the series. I thought maybe 3 or 4, 5. But luckily, I've never thought, oh, I'm repeating myself. This is the same thing as it is in book 2. Or I've always tried to, follow an idea that isn't just, more of the same, but different trousers or whatever. Yeah. So, but it's difficult. One of the most difficult things about longevity as a writer is just remembering all the stuff and just keeping track of everything, because you've got to work with a really good editor. You have to work with somebody who, because as a writer, I mean, all writers watching this will know, they just get really invested in it, in the story, and they just hammering away at the keyboard and it all just comes out. But then you just need somebody who maybe isn't quite so close to it to be saying, well, why has he suddenly got different glasses? In book 3, 4 years ago, you said he got these kind of glasses. That's what my editor does so well. So it's quality control. I think you can things out and hope nobody notices, but they will notice. And I think if readers are spotting things that you couldn't be bothered to get right, that's a bit of a, why should readers invest in this, really? And why should readers continue to invest in it if you're not putting in that effort to keep the quality control as high as it possibly can be? So that's been a big challenge. Yeah, the more books there are behind the book that I'm writing, the harder it is to make sure that everything's consistent.
Nobody's eyes change colour halfway through, and
but as with being a journalist, and I'm also an editor. I work with as well as an editor and a writing coach, and I've developed a kind of obsession for making sure things are as kind of high quality consistency underneath, as well as making sure that the top level is kind of positive and exciting enough and interesting and intense enough. Those two things together are really difficult, I think, to get right.
Yeah. How do you actually balance your time? Because you've got a family, you write, you work as an editor, like you say, you're a story consultant.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. Is there kind of a set pattern to your day, or does it depend on what's going on at the moment?
Oh, yeah. I have to get out. I have to, I'm quite sporty, I'm quite outdoorsy, so I have to get out and play football. I play football a lot, 2-3 times a week now. So I sort of tend to fit things around that, because that's really important to me, sort of mentally.
That is not the answer. I don't know what I expected. That wasn't it.
Yeah, I tend to, because I do sort of, it means a lot to me to be able to play football. So because I play an hour, and there's a little break in between, and it's really that hour, I just turn everything off. The only thing that matters is that game of football. And I think that's really important for your mental health. I'm sure a lot of people watching this will have similar things that they feel the same way about. So those 2-3 sessions a week of football, I sort of build the week around them to make sure that they happen. Because I know that I can go down to the cellar when I'm writing and really go to the dark places. But I've got to have some kind of connection with the world, get outside, a bit of fresh air. Well, that's really important to me. I don't just kind of like lurk in a cave for sort of 4 months and see what happens after that.
Did you just say you write in a cellar?
No, I said go down to the cellar, as in like, metaphorically.
Okay.
As in really sort of, go to your dark place when you're writing. You can't just sort of, it's that thing, make it dark and tell me a joke, that kind of classic advice for writers anyway. If it's all just kind of doom and horror and people's, you soon just get bored of it. Yeah. That's why I really work on these books and make the detectives real. They joke about things, they talk about, they, like Sawyer has little quirks, like eating his dietary habits aren't particularly adult, eats sweets, sort of quite kind of, he's quite adolescent in that respect, and there's lots of sort of jokes and lots of lightness to the actual relationships. I mean, generally, but back to your original question, my sort of day in terms of how I fit it all in is really, as long as I'm playing football, I'm happy. As long as I've got the next football session, I know where that's coming from, and I'm happy. And then yeah, I tend to write in the mornings. I tend to write fairly early, and then I only write for about 3 hours or so. You know, and then I just think I've had enough of that. I'm bored of that now. It's too intense. I need to do something else. I just can't keep it up for longer than that because I just find it's a bit burnout. And when I went to this show in Las Vegas, I was talking to some American authors, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, I write 5,000 words an hour." It's just ridiculous.
How is that even? How does anybody move that fast on a keyboard?
Well, I mean, I submit that those 5,000 words aren't the best 5,000 words to write in an hour. I think the work is probably going to have to come later on down the line, whereas I tend to do a lot of outlining. So
yeah,
that's another kind of like the first answer to your question. Really, is about I tend to do a lot of work up front and making sure that all the pieces fit together and all the cogs are working.
And that doesn't answer the question that you're asking. You don't feel like you answer that in the planning, because that's something that I've had conversations about where people have said, I can't plan because as I write it out, I feel like I've answered all the questions.
Yeah,
so
I think
how's that balance for you?
No, I don't mind that because what I want to do is I want to put up a sort of a scaffolding, and then when I'm writing, I'm putting the building up. See what I mean? And as long as the scaffolding's there, I feel happy that I've got a basic structure. I know what's happening. I certainly don't meticulously, plan everything in note form and adhere to that. Because as you write, you find the interest comes from what characters do when you don't expect it, or you're thinking, where'd that come from? And it can be all about your mood on that day or whatever. But I want to know what this story's about, why I'm trying to tell it, what's the theme at the heart of it. As I say, I think the Troubles and this particular element of fear of God, and there's a story of child abuse at a school in the Skeleton Lake, an old school in the 70s and 80s that comes back. So I like to know there's a kind of kernel of what the story is about, and then I build everything around that. But the outlining is important to me, but also the actual, as you say, the writing from just sitting down and seeing what comes out. I love a blank page, people say they're scared of blank pages. I quite like it. It's just a canvas to start slapping on the paint, seeing what happens.
If you were, a lot has changed since you started Jake's Lowe series. First book published 2018.
Yeah.
So if you had to start again today, is there anything you'd do differently?
Let's start again. I don't know,
not with this series, but if this was day one as a writer.
Well, yeah. Because we're now in the world of AI, aren't we? That's the problem. But so that's a totally new world, and I think AI has been really helpful. I use AI to kind of for research, and then I check it when it tells me things. But I think it's really helpful as a sort of like Google Deluxe. That's kind of what I use it for. I certainly don't get it away for me, but it's kind of helpful in that it's obviously a bit more like a 3D Google search. So I think in terms of the research, what I do differently now, I'd probably start to sort of see how I can integrate AI in a sort of benign way into my process, because there's just no point complaining about it. It's here, and you just need to find a way to integrate with it. And it's the old Darwinian thing, isn't it? You adapt or you sort of die. So the adaptation is the challenge for all creative people now, how we actually adapt to AI as it develops. But yeah, if I started again now, that would be the thing that would be top of my mind, how I'm going to be able to write and make this series last over the years with all this unpredictability that we don't know what's going to be coming and where it's going to come from. So, but otherwise, process, I would probably have more of an idea of where the whole series is going, but because I had an idea for that, but it was a bit vague. But I think I'll probably develop that a little bit more. But otherwise, I don't know. I just sort of, because I've been a journalist before I started writing novels and things, I was quite happy with it never really intimidated me, the idea of sitting down and writing. But if I was giving advice to somebody starting now, then I would say, I mean, it seems so obvious, but I'd say the number one thing is you're going to need to get used to AI being here. It's going to be a huge, huge challenge for anyone doing anything creative over the next 5-10 years. So have a view on that. You know, how are you going to use it, and how's it going to affect you?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because there's so many, facets to it. There's so many things that could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, and we're still, quite early days with it.
Yeah, I think what's changed is just in terms of like if you think of content, it's a horrible phrase, but the idea of content. I think we had 10 years or so of content being it's how we get it, it's how it arrives to us. So remember, before Netflix and the likes of Netflix, it was all go to the video shop, rent videos out, DVDs or whatever. So you had to go to get it. In the last 10 years, it's been all about how we streaming it, music, video, everything. The next 10, I think, will be how it's created. That will be what the revolution will be, how that content is created in the first place. So that's the bit where anyone sitting down to do anything creatively, writing, filmmaking, making music, you'll just have to get used to the fact that you're in a completely different world now. And it's about how you engage with that that's going to determine whether or not you succeed in something. So depressing as I might say, I don't want to end this on a downbeat note. But.
No, you just mentioned Netflix, so I'm going to ask you, have you watched anything good recently? Because I've just watched a series, I think it was 7 episodes, called Echoes, and it was basically a twin story, but not the twin story that you would imagine. Right. So I found it really, really interesting.
Yeah. I watch weird things on Netflix.
Come on, give us some tips. What should we be watching?
Sort of get weird obsessions with I'm watching this thing, Hitler's Inner Circle. It's really well made. It's about 10 episodes, but because they've got no footage, it's all about all the main people around Hitler. It tells about his rise in sort of 20s Germany. But so sort of Goering and Goebbels and Himmler and all these people. And because they've got no footage of these people, or very limited footage, they have to do reconstructions. So they have reconstructions of people who look a bit like them, and there's not really much they can do. They just have to keep showing them sort of arguing and shouting at each other in blurry shots. But because they use really eminent historians as talking heads, it's just weirdly addictive. You just can't. I can't tear my eyes off it. And it's all about the actual human beings behind this, as we know, this kind of terrible sort of system, all the hideous atrocities that committed. But what I find interesting about it is it's just all about these individual people, these men, and their motivations and where they're. And something that really comes out of it is it's all just egos. It's all male egos, and they're all just infighting, and they all want to be close to Hitler, and they all want to sort of rise a bit higher than each other, and they're backstabbing. And you rarely sort of hear that story. I think you just hear all the standard kind of World War II tropes. But so that's quite compelling. And then I started to watch Three Body Problem, which because I read the book, or one of the books, and I thought, I sort of connected with about 50% of it and skimmed a lot of the rest of it. But looked so far so good. What else am I watching? I'm a big fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm on.
I've never seen it. I think I might have seen a bit when it first came out.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And so, because it's just all about the minor child's life, and I often find myself in those kind of situations where, when you watch it, you'll see what I mean. Where he gets involved in kind of very odd. So he has these weird little rules, like when's the cut-off time where you're allowed to call somebody and stuff. And he has very clear ideas about these things. But yeah, the sort of minor child's life. Yeah, this is the same thing, usual thing when people ask you this question, your sort of mind goes a bit blank. But so I've basically presented a version of myself as this kind of weird loner watching Hitler documentaries. But
I've been looking forward to seeing you for weeks. So what does that say about me as well?
I don't know, but
Rhetorical. Let's not go there.
yeah, I kind of really, you know, I watch a lot of comic stuff as well. I'm not just sitting watching things about it's just evil people in history. But I also really enjoyed. I mean, back on topic, Forensic CSI, which is on iPlayer at the moment,
Mm.
which is my favourite TV program, probably ever. Is 24 hours in A&E.
Right. Okay.
Right. I don't mean as a kind of my favourite thing as an incredible piece of drama or anything, but it's the thing that I kind of get the most out of because it's like reality TV, but it's just about people. It's about real life. It's about real connections and you know, love and all the things that we all, you know, we all recognise, we all empathise with, and sort of people in very difficult situations. And it's really well made, and you see all these help and all the medical professionals and how they have to cope with everything. I can't take my eyes off that. I love that program. And then there's also a kind of sister program called 24 Hours in Police Custody, which is kind of more in my.
I've seen more of those, I've got to admit, than the A&E ones.
Yeah. So, but they're kind of similar. You know, you see the stories of how people in 24 Hours in Police Custody, you're seeing someone who's made some bad choices and how they find themselves in this awful place. But yeah, and Forensic CSI, which is on iPlayer, yeah, it's sort of like 24 Hours in Police Custody behind the scenes version. Like in police custody, you see the detectives, the CID, sort of arrest people and how they're processed and how they actually go through trying to get a CPS to prosecute them or not. But with Forensic CSI, you're seeing the people in the background and what they're doing in order to try and secure that charge. You know, what they're doing with the forensics, what they're doing with the digital devices, and it's really well made. And it's, as a crime writer, obviously it's really useful to blossom holiday a little bit, but it's terrifying what they can find out from phones. What they can actually look, how deeply they can look into your phones. Don't get the idea that it's because you're deleting something, then it's gone, or because they just
nothing ever really goes.
No, nothing ever goes. So you see all these incredibly skillful and. I mean, I could never do that job. People sitting watching hours and hours of CCTV footage. Like, who does that? Who's got the just the resilience to do that? And the way that they piece things together. Yeah, I love it. It's fascinating.
I know we've not got loads of time left, but it is fascinating to think how technology has changed in the respect of, as we're saying, nothing has ever, it never really goes. There's always a digital footprint. You've written it down and, you know, sent a snap to people and people think the messages just disappear because that's what the app tells you. Not true. Yeah. So it's not like back in the day when a writer could, you know, burn down a church or burn down the hospital because that's where all the records are. You know, all of that. You've got such a tough job now.
I know it's difficult. When I went to that conference, I went to a session with some some American cops. There's a US Marshal. He's the guy who writes the Jack Ryan series now. So really brilliant. And and I asked a question to them saying, you know, what, because they're all kind of retired police and they started writing, saying that how have things changed since you know, in terms of technology when you started. And they were just, it's a nightmare. It's impossible. You kind of you find it. You just have to go through all these sort of this little flow chart about CCTV, ANPR, you know, phone masts. you kind of, I found myself doing it. I was watching something the other day where they were just trying to work out where someone had been and whether they were telling the truth. And I'm just shouting at the screen, phone masts, phone masts. just check where their phone pinged. It's like you sort of you become a bit of an armchair expert and stuff like this. But yeah, it's an AI. You know, we're mentioning AI a lot, but that really is the Wild West because now you're going to be able to. I mean, criminal defence saying I didn't say that. That's AI. You know, people recording you. That no longer is that credible evidence, surely. no longer is video footage of you or an image of you doing something credible evidence, because it can be manipulated. You can just say, oh, it's a deep fake, it's not me. And that's a really scary, as I say, the next 5 or 10 years are going to be like living in some sort of dystopian sort of sci-fi film. Because
I do remember seeing some AI, and it was we won't go into who, but it was 2 people running for a certain position, and somebody had done like deep fakes of them telling people to vote for the other person. If I hadn't known what I was watching, I'd have wondered what on earth I'd been drinking. Kind of like, why? How is that even possible? It's insane, the things that can be done.
Exactly, as you were saying, for crime writers, it's hard enough that writing in a world where you can't get away with going, oh, no one saw it. We go LBC series, we ring doorbells. You've got to jump through all those hoops.
Yeah.
And now, increasingly, you're going to have to jump through hoops where you can't just say, oh, there he is on video, because it might not be him on video, it might be faked. So I think I had an idea for a book where it's basically set in the 80s. It's set in the mid-80s to late 80s.
Seems safe.
Yeah, just pre-internet, just nice and safe. There's no sat navs in cars. You can't check the history of sat navs. You can't do any of that. Just sort of close off all those avenues and just make it, a bit more kind of lo-fi. But yeah, it must be. It is tough. I mean, I'm not. When I say tough, I'm not down the pit, but it's good work to do. It's
a good mental workout.
Yeah, you have to really sort of you have to really remember all those little tricks that you have to follow to make sure it's up to date and it's plausible. As I say, that is why you need an editor. You need someone who's like an advocate who is. Because my editor won't let me get away with anything. She wouldn't let me get away with something in 10 Rivers of the North where, it's in this park and there's like a sensory garden and there's some flowers. And she sent me just a thing saying, well, they wouldn't be doing it this time of year. You're not getting that.
Get away with nothing.
She was like, sunflowers, forget it. You can't have them. So you just need that kind of someone to pull you up on stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, good luck with editors with AI and crime writers can negotiate that.
This is true. We're over time really, but just before we finish, you can get The Long Dark as a free novella. How can people get that?
Yeah, if you go to my website, andrewlowewriter.com, then you just give me your email address and you can have it. It's free. That's all I ask. And so that's a prequel. Introducing Jake Sawyer is the tagline for The Long Dark. He's set in Lanzarote, where he's with his girlfriend at the time, and he's working in the Met in London. He's supposed to be on holiday, but of course, classically, he gets involved in something. So it's a novella. So it's kind of me trying to introduce the character, introduce his traits, his background, things that you're going to see in the series ahead. I get a lot of readers saying they've read through all the 8 books so far, and then they've gone back and read The Long Dark and really enjoyed it because they've spotted loads of little Easter eggs and things like that in there for them. So yeah, if you've never read any of the Sawyer books, then The Long Dark, it's only a novella, it's about 30,000 words or something. So it's quite lean and mean. It's a good place to start.
I've dropped the web address in the comments so people can find it. So just finish us off, please, Andrew, with a recap of Tender is the North and when it will be released.
This is horrible for you. You're going to say, just finish us off with a little song.
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds like far more fun.
Definitely don't want that. What was the question again? We're a recap of Tender is the North.
Yeah, so it comes out on the 26th of April. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to find in this book.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the story about the guy who is arrested for abusing bodies in a mortuary. And Sawyer is a little bit out of the picture at the start, but he's very central to it. He gets more and more into the picture as the story goes on. And ultimately, you realise that this guy records a video confession saying, you know, he's in a dark place, and tabloids are going crazy about this idea of him being the vulture, this kind of necrophile, and Sawyer doesn't buy it, basically, and that's the idea. Really, he sort of sees through it and becomes more and more involved, starts to investigate it when he really shouldn't. Again, I can't tell you too much about
No,
what.
it's fair enough.
But yeah, and he gets drawn into it, and then as the story continues, it starts dark, and then just gets darker.
Not like you.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, springtime's here now. We're getting more light, so this is the time for a book like this for a bit of contrast.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who's watched from wherever you are in the world and left comments. And thank you, Andrew. I hope you'll come back and talk to us for the next book.
Yeah, I'd love to. Pleasure, Sam. Great to chat to you.
Always great to chat with you, Andrew.